Hello everyone, I'm Daniel,
And I'm Serena.
and today we're diving into a topic that's truly crucial for our senior viewers. You know, so many of us choose chicken for dinner, believing it's a really heart-healthy option, especially as we get older. It's a common go-to, isn't it? We're often advised to eat lean meats, and chicken seems to fit that bill perfectly.
Absolutely. It's light, versatile, and it's what many of us have been told is good for us for years. It feels like a safe, reliable choice.
It certainly does. But what if I told you that a very common type of chicken, one that many of us might be eating several times a week, could actually be silently undermining our heart health, particularly after the age of 65? Sometimes, the things we believe are best for us have hidden aspects we haven't considered. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on that.
That's quite a thought. I imagine if that piques someone's curiosity, or perhaps even causes a little concern, they're definitely not alone. It makes you wonder what we might be missing.
Exactly. In this video, we won't just talk about this seemingly healthy meat. We'll delve into why it might not be as beneficial as we think, especially for those of us in our golden years. More importantly, we'll explore practical ways to protect our precious hearts without necessarily giving up our favorite foods entirely. We'll look at some key aspects we often overlook and see how small shifts in awareness and action can make a big difference.
That sounds incredibly helpful. Understanding the why and then getting practical how-tos is always so empowering.
And do stay with us, because there's one particular point we'll discuss that often surprises people the most, and recognizing it early could have a significant impact on your long-term health. Before we dive deeper, if you find these kinds of conversations, ones that offer new perspectives and support, valuable, please take a moment to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Your support truly helps us continue bringing useful content to our community.
It really does make a difference, and it lets us know what topics resonate most with all of you.
All right, let's begin our exploration. The first thing we need to address is the type of meat I'm referring to. It's primarily chicken, and to a certain extent pork, especially those raised in large-scale industrial farm settings.
Now, I can hear some people thinking, hold on, I thought chicken was the best choice. Low fat, high protein. And they wouldn't be wrong, fundamentally.
You're right, that's the common understanding. But the story doesn't quite end there, especially when we consider modern farming practices. Let me introduce you to a fictional friend of ours. Let's call her Mrs. Julie. Like many in her 60s, Mrs. Julie is very health conscious. She often chooses skinless chicken breast for lunch and dinner because her doctor recommended lean protein to maintain muscle mass and manage her weight. She's proud of eating healthily for years.
That sounds like so many people I know, diligently following good advice.
Indeed. However, recently, Mrs. Julie has been feeling more tired than usual. Her joints seem a bit stiffer in the mornings, and her blood pressure has nudged up slightly, despite maintaining what she believes is a good diet. What Mrs. Julie, and perhaps many of us don't realize, is the potential issue lurking in that industrially farmed chicken and pork. This brings us to our first key point: the hidden danger of inflammatory omega-6 fatty acids.
Omega-6? I've heard of omega fatty acids, but I'm not sure I understand the specific concern here.
That's a great question. The core problem lies in the ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 fatty acids in these meats. Our bodies need both, but they need to be in balance. Ideally, the ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 should be around 1 to 1 to 4 to 1 first.
So, what happens with industrially farmed chicken and pork that throws this balance off?
Well, their diet in these settings is predominantly corn and soy. These feeds are very high in omega-6 fatty acids. As a result, the meat from these animals contains an incredibly high amount of omega-6, sometimes with ratios reaching 15 to 1, 20 to 1, or even higher compared to omega-3. So, our friend Mrs. Julie, by eating industrial chicken several times a week, was unknowingly loading up on omega-6.
That's quite an imbalance. Why is that particularly a problem for us, especially as we get older, say over 65?
When omega-6 is consumed in excess and out of balance with omega-3, it tends to promote inflammation in the body. Chronic low-grade inflammation is a major risk factor for many age-related conditions, including heart disease, arthritis, type 2 diabetes, and even some cancers and cognitive decline. As we age, our bodies are already more susceptible to inflammation. Adding a large dietary load of omega-6 is like pouring fuel on a smoldering fire.
That makes a lot of sense. So, for Mrs. Julie, her fatigue, joint stiffness, and that slight rise in blood pressure could in part be due to this silent inflammation, fueled by a diet she thought was perfectly healthy. That must be incredibly frustrating for someone who thinks they're doing everything right.
It can be. So, what can we do to change this? Firstly, start paying more attention to the source of your meat. If possible, look for chicken or pork that is pasture-raised or organic. Animals raised this way often have a more varied diet, including grasses and insects, which helps them develop a much more balanced omega-6 to omega-3 ratio.
Those options can sometimes be a bit more expensive, can't they?
They can be, that's true, but perhaps think of it as an investment in your health, and you don't necessarily have to eat them every day. Secondly, consider reducing the frequency of eating industrially farmed chicken and pork. Instead of 4 to 5 times a week, maybe try 1 to 2 times. Moderation is key. It's not about complete elimination unless you choose to.
That seems like a manageable approach. Focusing on quality when you do have it, and perhaps having it a little less often.
Precisely. And thirdly, actively increase your intake of omega-3 sources to help balance that ratio. Fatty fish like wild-caught salmon, mackerel, herring, and sardines are excellent. Flax seeds, chia seeds, and walnuts are also rich in omega-3s. Mrs. Julie, for example, could start adding some ground flaxseed to her morning oatmeal or having grilled salmon once or twice a week.
Those are all wonderfully healthy foods in their own right, too. It sounds like when Mrs. Julie started making these shifts, choosing pasture-raised chicken when she could, eating industrial chicken less often, and adding more salmon, she began to notice a difference?
Yes, she did. She reported feeling less tired in the afternoons, and her morning joint aches started to ease a bit. Now, before we go further, it's so important to remember that any changes to your diet, especially if you have existing health conditions or are on medication, should always be discussed with your doctor or a registered dietitian. What we're sharing here is general information to help you have those informed conversations.
That's a crucial reminder, thank you. It's about being empowered with knowledge to work alongside your healthcare provider. So, for our viewers, how often do you find yourselves eating chicken or pork? And have you ever considered the source? We'd love to hear about your experiences in the comments below.
Moving on to our second point, understanding inflammation better and its specific impact on heart health. We've mentioned inflammation, but it's vital to understand why it's particularly dangerous for our hearts as we age. Inflammation doesn't just cause joint pain. It's a complex process that can damage the inner lining of our arteries, called the endothelium.
Can you explain that a bit more? How does that damage occur?
Imagine your arteries are like smooth, flexible pipes. Inflammation is like corrosion or rust forming inside those pipes. It makes the inner surface rough and more vulnerable. This creates an environment where LDL, the bad cholesterol, can more easily stick to the artery walls and begin forming atherosclerotic plaques. Over time, these plaques can thicken, narrowing the arteries and restricting blood flow to the heart. This is coronary artery disease.
That really paints a clear picture of what's happening inside. So if a plaque ruptures,
Exactly. If a plaque ruptures, the body responds by forming a blood clot at the site. This clot can completely block the artery, leading to a heart attack. Or, if it happens in an artery leading to the brain, it can cause a stroke. For Mrs. Julie, her rising blood pressure could have been an early sign that her blood vessels were becoming less flexible, partly due to this sustained, low-grade inflammation.
it's quite sobering to think how these dietary choices can have such a direct physical impact on our arteries. So, apart from adjusting the type of meat we eat, what else can we do to combat this inflammation?
Great question. Firstly, prioritize a diet rich in naturally anti-inflammatory foods. This includes plenty of colorful fruits and vegetables, especially berries and dark leafy greens, nuts, extra virgin olive oil, and spices like turmeric and ginger. Think of the Mediterranean diet. It's renowned for its heart benefits, largely due to its anti-inflammatory properties.
The Mediterranean diet is so often recommended, and it's delicious too, which is a bonus.
It is. Secondly, maintain regular physical activity. Exercise isn't just good for muscles and weight. It's a powerful anti-inflammatory tool. Even a brisk 30-minute walk most days of the week can make a significant difference.
I know I certainly feel better when I get out for my walk. It's not just physical, it clears the mind too.
Absolutely. And thirdly, manage stress. Chronic stress can also fuel inflammation. Finding healthy ways to relax and cope with stress, like meditation, yoga, spending time on hobbies, or simply connecting with friends and family, is very important. Mrs. Julie started attending a gentle yoga class twice a week and made an effort to walk around her neighborhood each morning. She also began experimenting with new recipes, featuring more vegetables and using olive oil instead of other vegetable oils that can be higher in omega-6.
It sounds like she made some really positive, holistic changes. For those watching, are you incorporating any anti-inflammatory habits into your daily life? What works best for you? We'd love for you to share your experiences.
Our third point is about reading labels and becoming a savvy consumer. One of the biggest challenges is that food packaging can sometimes be misleading. Labels like natural don't necessarily mean the animal was pasture-raised or had an optimal diet. Cage-free for laying hens just means they weren't in cages, but they could still be in a crowded barn eating a primarily grain-based diet.
That can be so confusing. You think you're making a good choice based on the label, but it might not mean what you assume.
Precisely. For chicken and pork, look for more specific terms, pasture-raised. This is often considered the gold standard. It means the animal had space to roam outdoors and eat a more natural diet, including grass and insects. This usually leads to higher omega-3 and lower omega-6 levels. Organic meat means the animal was fed organic feed, no pesticides, GMOs, and wasn't given antibiotics or growth hormones. They must also have access to the outdoors. This is a good option.
And what if you're at the butcher counter?
Don't hesitate to ask your butcher about the source of the meat and how the animals were raised. A good butcher should be able to provide this information. Mrs. Julie started spending a few extra minutes at the supermarket, reading labels carefully. It was a bit overwhelming at first, but she gradually became more familiar with the terms. She also found a local butcher shop that specialized in products from smaller farms, where she could talk directly to the seller about the meat's origin.
It might seem like a bit of extra effort initially, but it sounds like it really empowers you to make the best choices for your health. Do you find reading food labels challenging? Any tips you'd like to share with the community?
So, we've explored a perhaps lesser-known aspect of a very common food. Our Mrs. Julie, who initially thought she was doing all the right things for her health by choosing conventional chicken, realized that seemingly small choices about food sourcing could make a big difference in how she felt and her overall well-being, especially her heart health.
It really shows that by understanding more about omega-6, inflammation, and how to be a more informed consumer, she was able to make positive adjustments. It's not about completely eliminating chicken or pork, but rather choosing more consciously, focusing on quality over quantity, and balancing her diet with other anti-inflammatory foods.
Exactly. And as a result, she reported feeling more energetic, having fewer joint aches, and feeling more confident that she was truly taking care of her heart. Aging is inevitable, but how we age is largely up to us. It's never too late to make small adjustments that can lead to big improvements in your quality of life. Knowledge is power, and hopefully, today's information has equipped you with a bit more of that power.
That's such an encouraging message. It really underscores that we can be proactive at any stage of life.
Now it's your turn to reflect and perhaps take action. Which of the points we discussed today resonated most with you? What's one small change you feel you could make starting this week? Maybe trying a new fatty fish, or looking into pasture-raised chicken options in your area.
We genuinely hope this conversation has been helpful. If it did resonate with you, please give the video a thumbs up and consider sharing it with someone you know who might benefit from hearing this message. And don't forget to subscribe for more helpful advice to help us all live healthier and happier at every age.
Remember, you have the power to shape your later years into a time of connection, joy, and well-being. Thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you in the next video.
Take care, everyone.